I spent $120,000 on my sister's dream wedding, the silk gown, the garden venue, every rose petal. She thanked me by grabbing the microphone and announcing to 150 guests, "My sister is officially fired from her own company. The loser finally gets what she deserves." The room went silent. Champagne glasses froze mid-air. My parents wouldn't meet my eyes. Melissa stood there glowing, certain she'd won. She had no idea that in 3 minutes those doors would open and everything would collapse. Have you ever been betrayed by someone you sacrificed everything for? The stories on this channel are created solely for entertainment, educational, and storytelling purposes. While some stories are inspired by real situations submitted by viewers via email, most details have been fictionalized, combined, or altered. My name is Danielle Foster. I'm 36 years old, and I'm the founder of Foster Logistics Solutions, a consulting firm I built from nothing into a company generating $2 million a year. But if you asked my family what I do for a living, they'd probably shrug and say something about office work. That's the thing about becoming invisible. After a while, people stop looking altogether. 4 months before my sister's wedding, my phone rang on a Tuesday evening. I was reviewing quarterly projections in my home office when my mother's name lit up the screen. I already knew what she wanted before I answered. Melissa was getting married, and Melissa needed things. "The venue alone is $60,000, my mother said, her voice carrying that particular tone, half request, half accusation. "Your father and I simply don't have it, and Derek's family isn't offering anything substantial. You know how important this is to your sister." I did know. I'd spent my entire life knowing exactly how important Melissa was. Growing up, Melissa was the golden child, beautiful, charming, the one who lit up every room. Our parents praised her publicly at every opportunity. But here's what nobody outside our family understood. Behind closed doors, they compared her to me constantly. "Why can't you be independent like Danielle? Your sister never asks us for money. Danielle figured things out on her own." Those comparisons created something dark in Melissa. She didn't just want success, she needed to defeat me to feel worthy. Every achievement of mine became a wound to her. So I learned to hide. I made myself small at family gatherings, deflected questions about work, let conversations redirect to her. It was easier than watching her eyes harden every time I mentioned something good in my life. At work, I was a completely different person. Confident, decisive, respected. But my family had never seen that woman. They only knew the quiet one in the corner. $120,000, I said into the phone. "For how many guests?" 150. "It's going to be beautiful, Danielle. She deserves this." I agreed to fund the wedding faster than my mother expected, but I had one condition: every expense would go through my company as a sponsored event contract. Proper documentation, clear paper trail. My mother sighed. Melissa. When she heard, snapped at me, "Why does everything have to be so complicated with you?" She didn't understand that I was protecting myself. I didn't fully understand it either, just instinct honed by years of being the family afterthought. What I didn't know then was that Melissa had already set her plan in motion. 2 years earlier, she'd lost her job and spiraled into crisis. Eviction notices, tearful calls to our parents. The pressure on me was relentless until I finally offered her a position as office manager at my company. I thought it might repair our relationship. I set boundaries, administrative access only, nothing financial. I thought I was being careful. 14 months ago, while organizing my office, Melissa found my annual financial report. $2 million in revenue. Her boring sister with her little consulting thing was wealthy. That night, she told her fiancé, Derek, everything. I didn't know then that Derek was drowning a mortgage broker under federal investigation, desperately seeking a clean company to hide behind. My success became their opportunity. The first warning came from Gloria Weaver, my CFO. 62 years old, meticulous, loyal since day one. She'd noticed Melissa lingering near my locked file cabinet after hours. That Monday morning, Gloria called me into her office. Her face was troubled as she turned her monitor toward me. "I do a security review every week," she said. "Last Saturday at 11 p.m., someone accessed the company's original incorporation files. The timestamp is right here." She paused. "It wasn't me. I know it wasn't you. And there's only one other person with a key to that cabinet." I stared at Gloria's monitor, watching the cursor blink next to the timestamp. Saturday, 11 p.m. Melissa's credentials. My sister had broken into my files while I was home watching television completely unaware. The professional part of me, the one my family never saw, took over immediately. I thanked Gloria, calmly asked her to keep this between us, and walked back to my office with steady steps. Inside, my mind was already racing through possibilities. Confronting Melissa directly would be satisfying, but it would also be stupid. She would deny everything, destroy evidence, and spin some story that made me look paranoid. I needed to know exactly what she was planning before I made any move at all. The next morning, I arrived at the office 2 hours early. I installed a small camera facing the file cabinet, hidden inside a decorative plant that had sat on my bookshelf for years. Nobody would notice it. Then, I created a fake memo on company letterhead describing expansion plans and a fictional investor named Harrison Capital Partners. I left it in a folder near the top of the cabinet, easy to find for anyone searching through my documents. If that name surfaced anywhere in conversation, in documents anywhere at all, I would know exactly who had leaked it. Within 1 week, the camera gave me everything I needed. 3 separate nights. Melissa entered my office after everyone had left. She used her key to open the file cabinet. She photographed page after page with her phone, methodically working through contracts, incorporation documents, and financial statements. Watching the footage made me feel hollow. This was my sister. We had shared a bedroom until I was 12. I had held her hand at our grandmother's funeral, and here she was photographing my life's work in the dark, planning something I still did not fully understand. Gloria discovered the next piece. She had been tracking unusual activity and found that someone had requested certified copies of company documents from the Secretary of State. The request was signed by Melissa Foster, listing herself as co-owner of Foster Logistics Solutions. I had never made her co-owner of anything. I had never even discussed it. This was not just snooping anymore. This was forgery. I waited until Melissa left for lunch one afternoon, then searched her desk. In the bottom drawer beneath a stack of fashion magazines, I found a manila folder. Inside were ownership transfer documents ready to be filed. The paperwork would make Melissa and Derek equal partners in my company, effectively pushing me out of the business I had built from nothing. My social security number was on every page. My signature had been practiced on a separate sheet of paper, traced over and over until it looked almost perfect. Almost. I took photographs of everything with my own phone, then placed the folder exactly as I had found it. That evening, I called my mother. I kept my voice casual, curious. "Mom, did Melissa ask you for any of my documents recently? I'm trying to track down some paperwork and thought maybe she was helping me organize things." My mother's response was cheerful, completely unsuspecting. "Oh yes, she mentioned you needed help with a passport renewal, but were too busy to handle it yourself. I sent her the certified birth certificate copy we've had since you were little. She's always so thoughtful helping you out like that." I managed to thank her and end the call before my hands started shaking. Melissa had told our mother a lie to obtain my birth certificate. Combined with my social security number, which she had accessed through my company's HR files 3 months earlier, she had everything needed to steal my identity completely. This was not an impulsive scheme. This had been planned for over a year. I needed to understand why now. Why the sudden urgency after 14 months of access? The answer had to be Derek. I hired a private investigator named Margaret Santos, $8,000 worth every penny. She was thorough, discreet, and fast. The results arrived within 2 weeks, and they explained everything. Derek Thompson had not resigned from his previous company. He had been pushed out amid an internal investigation. More importantly, there was an active federal investigation into mortgage fraud at that company, and Derek was a primary subject. He had received a target letter from the FBI 8 months ago, formal notification that he was under investigation and likely to be indicted. The timeline suddenly made perfect sense. Derek needed a clean company to transfer assets into before federal prosecutors froze everything he owned. He needed legitimate income records to explain his lifestyle. He needed somewhere to hide. My company, with its solid reputation and healthy revenue, was the perfect target. And my sister, burning with a lifetime of resentment, was the perfect tool. The wedding was not just a celebration. It was a deadline. Everything had to be in place before Derek's legal situation collapsed completely. They were not just trying to steal my company, they were racing against federal prosecutors. As I gathered evidence and planned my response, I found myself thinking about patterns. Melissa had always needed to humiliate me publicly. It was never enough for her to succeed, she needed me to fail where everyone could see it. I remembered the family reunion 5 years ago when she announced my broken engagement to the entire room before I had told anyone. "I just thought everyone should know so they can support her," she had said, watching my face crumble with something like satisfaction in her eyes. I remembered Thanksgiving dinners where she mocked my boring job and my boring life, loudly repeatedly making sure every cousin and aunt heard her laughing. I remembered the Facebook post about my weight gain, complete with old photographs and laughing emojis, shared where all our mutual friends could see. Melissa did not just want to win. She needed witnesses. She needed an audience for my destruction. If I confronted her privately, she and Derek would destroy evidence, deny everything, and disappear before I could prove anything. But if I waited, if I let the pressure build, if I gave her the perfect stage, she might not be able to resist announcing her victory to the world. Her own need for public validation could be her downfall. I took everything to my attorney, the footage of Melissa photographing documents, the forged ownership papers, the identity theft through my social security number, and birth certificate, the connection to a notary who had falsified signatures. He reviewed it all carefully, his expression growing more serious with each page. "This is more than enough for arrest warrants," he said finally. "Forgery, fraud, conspiracy, identity theft. These are serious felonies. When do you want law enforcement to move?" I thought about the wedding, 150 guests, my parents who had never really seen me, the garden venue covered in flowers that I had paid for, the reception where Melissa would stand in her expensive gown, surrounded by everyone who had ever believed I was the lesser sister. "When is the wedding?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. 3 weeks from Saturday. Reception starts at 2 p.m. I was quiet for a long moment, turning possibilities over in my mind. I could end this now. I could have them arrested tomorrow and watch Melissa's perfect wedding collapse before it even happened. But something told me to wait. Something told me that Melissa would not be able to resist the spotlight, that she would find a way to announce her triumph publicly, that her own pattern of behavior would give me exactly what I needed. "Tell the sheriff's office that the suspects will be at the Riverside Garden venue that day," I said slowly. "I cannot control their timing, that is their call, not mine. But I can confirm that is where Derek and Melissa will be." The 3 weeks before the wedding passed slowly each day, heavy with anticipation and dread. I continued funding every expense, signing checks for florists and caterers and musicians, playing the role of the generous sister while knowing exactly what waited at the end. I watched Melissa float through final preparations with that particular glow. Brides have never suspecting that her perfect day was already unraveling. Part of me wanted to feel guilty. I searched for that feeling and found only a tired kind of sadness, the grief of losing a sister who had perhaps never really existed. The morning of the wedding arrived bright and warm. I dressed simply, a navy dress, modest jewelry, comfortable shoes. I was not there to compete with the bride. I arrived early at the Riverside Garden venue, where workers were arranging flowers and adjusting chair positions. The garden was beautiful, exactly as Melissa had envisioned. $120,000 of beauty, funded entirely by the sister she was planning to destroy. I found my father alone near the rose garden, adjusting his tie in the reflection of a window. He looked older than I remembered, his hair thinner, his movements slower. I approached him with a casual smile, keeping my voice light. "Dad, I meant to ask you something. That passport renewal Melissa mentioned a few months ago, did you end up giving her any of my documents?" He nodded without concern, still fussing with his tie. "Just the birth certificate copy. Your mother mailed it. Melissa said you were too busy to handle it yourself." He finally looked at me, confused by the question. "Why is something wrong?" I shook my head and told him everything was fine. But now I knew for certain. My parents were not conspirators. They had not knowingly participated in stealing my identity or my company. They had simply done what they had always done, trusted Melissa completely without verification, without ever thinking to call me directly. Their crime was not malice. It was a lifetime of choosing to see only one daughter while the other faded into the background. They had handed over the tools for my destruction because it never occurred to them that Melissa might lie. The ceremony began at noon. I sat in the third row watching my sister walk down the aisle in her $10,000 gown, watching Derek wait at the altar with nervous energy that everyone probably attributed to wedding jitters. I knew better. He was a man running out of time, marrying his way into a scheme that he hoped would save him from federal prosecutors. The vows were beautiful. The kiss was romantic. Everyone applauded as Melissa and Derek walked back up the aisle as husband and wife. I applauded too, my hands moving automatically while my mind calculated timing and possibilities. The reception began at 2. I positioned myself in a corner near the back of the tent, holding a glass of champagne I had no intention of drinking. 150 guests mingled and laughed, admiring the decorations complementing the bride. My parents circled around Melissa, like planets around the sun, adjusting her train, touching her hair, radiating pride. Nobody came to stand with me. Nobody asked why the woman who had paid for all of this was standing alone in the corner. I was invisible, just as I had always been in this family. I checked my watch, 2:15. The sheriff's office had said they would arrive sometime during the reception. They did not coordinate theatrical timing, they would come when they came. All I could do was wait. Then Melissa picked up the microphone. She tapped it twice, gathering attention, and the room gradually quieted. She thanked the guests for coming, thanked Derek for being the love of her life, thanked the vendors and the wedding party. Then her eyes found me across the room. And I want to give special thanks to my dear sister Danielle for her generous financial support. Something shifted in her voice. I saw it happen, that glitter in her eyes, that particular sharpness in her smile. Derek, standing beside her, looked confused at first, then alarmed. This was not planned. Whatever scheme they had constructed, it had not included a public announcement. But Melissa could not stop herself. 23 years of comparison, of being told to be more like Danielle, of never feeling quite good enough despite all the praise and attention, it all converged in this single moment. The spotlight was on her, the audience was watching. and I was standing in the corner like a shadow, and she could not resist. "I also want to share some exciting news," Melissa announced, her smile widening. "Starting today, Derek and I will be managing Foster Logistics Solutions. My sister has decided to step back from the business." She turned to face me directly, and her voice carried across the silent tent. "Danielle, you do not need to worry about work anymore. Consider yourself retired, finally free from pretending you are better than everyone else." Gasps rippled through the crowd. My parents stared at Melissa with bewildered expressions. Derek's face had gone completely white. He grabbed Melissa's arm and whispered something urgent, but she pulled away from him, still riding the adrenaline of public victory. I set down my champagne glass on a nearby table. Then I walked toward the front of the room, slowly and deliberately. My steps were measured. My expression was calm. This was not the invisible family Danielle walking forward. This was the professional Danielle, the one who had built a company from nothing, the one my family had never bothered to see. I stopped a few feet from my sister. "Melissa," I said, my voice carrying clearly across the silent room. "Are you absolutely certain about those documents?" Melissa laughed, still high on her moment. "They are notarized and ready to file. It is done, Danielle. You can finally stop pretending." I glanced at my watch, 2:28. "Who notarized them? What was his name?" The question seemed to confuse her. She hesitated, trying to remember. She looked at Derek for help. Derek was not looking at her anymore. His eyes were darting toward the exits, calculating distances, recognizing that something had gone terribly wrong. The reception hall doors opened. 2 sheriff's deputies walked in, not dramatically, not rushing. They simply entered and scanned the room, locating their targets with professional efficiency. They had intended to make a quiet arrest to pull Derek and Melissa aside with minimal disruption. But the entire room was already staring at the front, where Melissa stood frozen with a microphone clutched in her hand. The sheriff approached with calm authority. "Derek Thompson, Melissa Foster Thompson." The tent went completely silent. Even the string quartet stopped playing. "You are under arrest for forgery, fraud, conspiracy to commit theft, and identity theft." Derek did not run. He was too smart for that. Instead, he tried to talk his way out, his voice controlled and reasonable. "There has been a mistake. I am a licensed professional. Let me call my attorney and we can clear this up." The sheriff was unmoved. "Mr. Thompson, you should also know that upon your arrest, we have notified the FBI. They will be coordinating your transfer to federal custody regarding an ongoing mortgage fraud investigation. You will have plenty of time to call your attorney from holding." Derek's confidence crumbled. His shoulders sagged. The federal investigation he had been running from had finally caught up with him in the middle of his own wedding reception. Melissa stood motionless as a deputy approached her with handcuffs. The microphone was still in her hand. Her mouth was open, but no sound came out. As the deputy took her arm, she finally looked at me. There was no dramatic threat, no promise of revenge, just shock, pure absolute shock. For the first time in 33 years, my sister had nothing to say. As the deputies led Melissa toward the door, my mother rushed over and grabbed my arm. Her face was pale, her eyes wild with confusion. "You knew. This whole time you knew." I looked at my mother, this woman who had mailed my birth certificate without a single phone call to verify, who had never once asked about my actual life, my actual work, my actual struggles. "I have known for 3 months," I said quietly. "The real question is, in 36 years, why did you never once think to ask me if something was wrong?" My mother had no answer. She stood there in the middle of her younger daughter's ruined wedding reception, surrounded by confused guests and overturned champagne glasses with nothing to say. I did not wait for her to find words. I picked up my purse from the table where I had left it, walked past the whispering crowd, and drove myself home. That night, I sat alone in my apartment and felt something I had not expected, not triumph, not satisfaction, but a deep and hollow exhaustion. I had protected my company. I had stopped the theft, but I had also lost my sister forever, and I was not sure I had ever really had her to begin with. 3 months passed. The initial shock settled into something heavier, something that sat in my chest like a stone I could not quite dislodge. The legal proceedings moved forward with their own slow momentum, grinding through motions and hearings and negotiations. Derek waived his right to a speedy trial. His attorney was attempting to negotiate a plea deal with federal prosecutors, trying to reduce the mountain of charges that had accumulated against him. The state charges for forgery, fraud, and identity theft would likely be rolled into the federal case, which meant everything hinged on what the FBI decided to do with him. If convicted on all counts, he faced 15 to 20 years in federal prison. His assets had been frozen pending investigation. The fancy car, the investment accounts, the expensive watch collection. The man who had worn custom suits to family dinners now wore county orange for his court appearances. I saw photographs in the local news coverage. He looked smaller, somehow, diminished like the confidence had been a costume he could no longer afford. Melissa's case was being handled separately. Her attorney was building a defense around manipulation, arguing that Derek had exploited her emotionally, that she had not fully understood the legal implications of what she was doing. The prosecutor was not buying it. The evidence showed active participation, the photographs of my documents, the forged signatures she had practiced, the lies she had told our parents to obtain my birth certificate. This was not a woman who had been passively swept along. This was a woman who had made choices deliberate and sustained over more than a year. She had been offered a plea deal, 5 years in state prison, 5 years of probation afterward. According to my attorney, she was considering it. The alternative was a trial where all the evidence would be presented publicly, where her own actions would be examined in detail, where conviction could mean significantly more time. The corrupt notary Raymond Dole had already pleaded guilty. 18 months in prison, permanent loss of his license, and full cooperation with the prosecution. He was testifying against Derek and Melissa in exchange for the lighter sentence, filling in details about how this scheme had been constructed, whose idea it had been, who had paid him, and how much. My parents came to my apartment on a Saturday afternoon in October. It was the first time they had ever come to see me, not for wedding planning, not to ask for a favor, not because Melissa needed something delivered, just to see me. My mother started crying before she was fully through the door. My father looked older than I had ever seen him, his shoulders hunched, his eyes avoiding mine. "We had no idea," my mother said, her voice breaking. "You have to believe us. You never would have what—" I kept my voice steady. I had spent 3 months preparing for this conversation, playing it out in my head during sleepless nights. You gave Melissa my birth certificate without calling me. Not once did you pick up the phone to verify her story. You have given her money attention. Belief everything for my entire life, without ever questioning anything she said, and me. When have you ever trusted my word over hers? When have you ever asked about my life without turning the conversation back to Melissa within 5 minutes? My father tried to speak. We thought we were helping family. We did not know. You did not want to know. I said, there is a difference. I built a company. I became successful. I have employees who depend on me. Clients who trust me. A reputation I earned through years of hard work. And you did not notice any of it. Not because I hid it from you, because you never looked, you never asked, you never cared enough to be curious about who I actually became. The silence stretched between us, filling my small living room with years of accumulated pain. My mother sobbed into her hands. My father stared at the floor like he might find answers in the carpet pattern. I let them sit in that discomfort. I was done making other people feel better at my own expense. That was not my job anymore. It had never been my job, but I had volunteered for it anyway, year after year, hoping that enough sacrifice might eventually earn me the attention Melissa received for simply existing. They left an hour later without resolution. There were no hugs, no promises that everything would be okay. Just a quiet acknowledgement that something had broken between us, something that might never fully heal. I closed the door behind them and felt lighter somehow, like I had finally set down a weight I had been carrying so long I had forgotten it was there. Through the legal proceedings, more details emerged about how the scheme had developed. Derek had been working on Melissa for over a year, since the very night she told him about finding my financial report. He had fed her resentment carefully, strategically, like tending a fire. "Your sister has everything handed to her," he would say. "All that money, all that success while you struggle to make rent. She owes you. This is not stealing, this is evening the scales. This is justice." He had framed the entire scheme as righteous as something Melissa deserved after years of being compared unfavorably to me. And Melissa, starving for validation, desperate to finally win at something, had believed him. Or she had chosen to believe him because it gave her permission to do what she already wanted to do. When my attorney told me these details, I felt something complicated move through me. Melissa had made her own choices. She was an adult, she was responsible for her actions, but she had also been manipulated by someone who recognized her wounds and exploited them systematically. Both things could be true at the same time. Understanding this did not make me forgive her, but it made the situation feel less like pure evil and more like tragedy, the inevitable result of a family that had broken both its daughters in different ways. Gloria came by one evening with Thai food and no agenda. We sat on my balcony as the sun set, eating pad Thai from cardboard containers and watching the sky turn orange and pink. "You did everything right," Gloria said between bites. "Do not let anyone make you feel guilty for protecting what you built." I was quiet for a moment, watching a plane trace a white line across the darkening sky. "You know, my parents have never once asked me what I actually do. 8 years I have had this company. You have been there since year one. You have celebrated every milestone, worried through every difficult quarter, stayed late when deadlines loomed. You are more family than they ever were." Gloria raised her glass of wine toward me. "Family is not about blood. It is about who shows up." We clinked glasses and sat together in comfortable silence, two women who had built something real in a world that often felt false. The next morning, a letter arrived in my mailbox. The envelope was thin and white, with a return address from the county jail. I recognized the handwriting immediately. Melissa's looping script unchanged since she used to leave notes on my bedroom door when we were children. I carried the envelope inside and set it on my kitchen counter. I stared at it for a long time before finally sliding my finger under the flap. Inside, there was no apology, no expression of remorse, just blame, excuses, justifications I had heard variations of my entire life. And then near the end, something I had not expected at all. Melissa had written something that stopped me cold. "You think you were the invisible one? Mom and Dad praised me to everyone else, but when we were alone, it was always, 'Why can't you be responsible like Danielle?' And 'Danielle figured things out on her own,' and 'We never have to worry about Danielle.' I was never enough for them either, just in a different way. Derek was the first person who told me I deserved more." I set the letter down and stared out my kitchen window for a long time. There was no apology in those pages. Melissa is still not capable of that. Mostly, it contained blame and excuses, but those few sentences changed something in how I understood our family. We were both raised in a house where love came with comparison. I survived by disappearing, by making myself small enough that the comparisons could not reach me. Melissa survived by competing, by trying to win a game that had no finish line. Neither of us was ever simply loved for who we were. The realization did not make me forgive her. What she did was criminal, calculated, and cruel. But understanding where it came from helped somehow. It made the whole tragedy feel less like madness and more like the inevitable result of a broken system that had damaged us both. 18 months after the wedding, the legal cases finally concluded. Derek pleaded guilty to 12 counts of mortgage fraud. The judge sentenced him to 15 years in federal prison. With good behavior, he might be released in his late 50s as a convicted felon with no assets, no career, and no future resembling the life he had schemed to build. Melissa took the plea deal, 5 years in state prison, 5 years of probation afterward. During sentencing, the judge noted that her role was not merely supportive, but active and premeditated. She will be 38 when she is released, starting over with a felony record and a shattered reputation. I do not know what kind of person she will be when she gets out. That is not my responsibility to figure out. The corrupt notary served his 18 months and has since disappeared into obscurity. I do not think about him. My attorney asked if I wanted to provide a victim impact statement for either sentencing hearing. I declined. The evidence speaks for itself, I told him. I do not need to perform my pain for anyone. I had spent too much of my life performing invisibility, performing accommodation, performing the role of the sister who asked for nothing. I was done with performances. I have agreed to rebuild contact with my parents, but only on my terms. We have dinner quarterly now, not weekly. The conversations focus on my life, my actual life, my work, my thoughts, instead of being redirected to Melissa's situation in prison. There are no guilt trips allowed, no "but she is your sister" comments, no pretending the past did not happen. The first year was awkward. My father has slowly learned to ask about my company and actually listen. My mother has learned to say, "How are you doing?" and wait for a real response. It is not warm between us. It is not the close family I once wished I had, but it is honest. And I have discovered that honest is worth more than warm. Gloria turned down the equity stake I offered her. "I am 62 years old, honey," she said, laughing. "Give me profit sharing and let me retire when I am ready, without all the ownership headaches." So that is what we arranged. More importantly, she has a friendship that will last far longer than any business arrangement. We traveled to Seattle together last spring for a company conference. Over dinner, she said something that has stayed with me. "You taught me something you know, that it is never too late to stand up for yourself." I raised my glass toward her. "And you taught me that the people who believe in you are not always the people who raised you. Sometimes they are the people who choose you." My company has expanded since the wedding. New office space, new hires, new contracts. The scandal did not hurt business. If anything, potential clients saw a woman who protected her work with intelligence and resolve. I stand at my office window, sometimes looking out at the city I have made my home, and I feel something I did not expect. Not triumph, not vindication, just clarity. I am not bitter about what happened. I am not hardened by it. I am simply clear now about who I am and what I will accept. I spent most of my life believing that if I stayed quiet enough, if I sacrificed enough, if I made myself small enough, I would finally be loved the way I needed. I was wrong. Real love does not require you to disappear. Real respect is not earned by suffering in silence. And standing up for yourself does not make you cruel or selfish. It makes you whole. Last week, I found an old photograph tucked in my desk drawer. Me and Melissa as children, maybe 5 and 4 years old, laughing at something off camera. Our faces were bright with joy. We were leaning into each other like two flowers sharing the same sun. Before comparison, before competition, before everything fractured, I looked at that photograph for a long time, remembering who we were before our parents taught us to see each other as rivals. I placed it back in the drawer gently and closed it. I did not throw it away. I did not frame it. It is just there where I can find it if I ever want to look again. The past exists. It shaped me, but it does not own me anymore. I turned toward the window, where morning light was spilling across the city in shades of gold and amber. Somewhere out there, my sister is serving her sentence. My parents are learning slowly and imperfectly how to see me. Gloria is planning her retirement, and I am standing in the life I built with my own hands, my own decisions, my own refusal to disappear. This is not the ending I imagined when I was a little girl. It is better. It is mine. Danielle's story reminds us protecting yourself is not selfish. It is necessary. Too many of us were raised to believe that being a good woman means sacrificing without limits and staying quiet when we are hurt. But that is not love. That is erasure. If you have ever been the invisible one who gives everything and receives nothing but expectations, please know this: you deserve better. You are allowed to set boundaries. You are allowed to demand respect. It is never too late to stop disappearing and start being seen. Family is not only about blood, it is about who shows up and who sees you for who you truly are. Sometimes the people who choose you become more family than the people you were born to. Thank you for listening. If this story touched you, please subscribe and share your thoughts below. Have you ever had to stand up against someone who was supposed to love you?